Good afternoon, everyone. I think I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar about pilot awards for the use of complementary and integrative health methods to support deprescribing of benzodiazepine receptor agonists. This pilot award is associated with the US Deprescribing Research Network, and I'm Amanda Mixon, and with me is Dr. Sandra Simmons, as well as Joseph Christodoulou, and we lead the pilot core of the network. We also have Dr. Catherine Sarkeesian from the Stakeholder Engagement Core, which is part of the network, and we have Drs. Cynthia Boyd and Mike Steinman, who are the principal investigators of USDeN. At the end of this presentation, we'll open it up for discussion, questions and answers, and we also have program officers from the NIH. I'd like to welcome Dr. Marcel Salive from the National Institute on Aging and Dr. Peter Murray from the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. So we have no relevant disclosures. I'd like to also thank the National Institute on Aging for funding the network and our scientific advisory board and the people listed here who help make the network run so smoothly. So what is the US Deprescribing Research Network, or what I like to call USDeN? Well, formally, it's all the entities you see here on the left-hand side of the screen, led by Dr. Cynthia Boyd and Mike Steinman. But it's also all of you who are part of the community, and some of those people are pictured on the right-hand side of the screen, who are interested in working and leading in the area of deprescribing. The Pilot and Exploratory Studies Core that you see on the left-hand side is one facet of USDeN, and you can see the other cores and working groups that are also part of the network. USDeN focuses our activities around 5 pillars, which include investigator development, stakeholder engagement, data and resources, several working groups, and then our group, which funds the pilot studies and grant planning activities. And specifically, today we're discussing a new funding mechanism that's generously supported by CIH to support integrative health methods that can be employed alongside deprescribing. So Dr. Simmons and I co-lead the pilot core, as I mentioned, and I'd like to note that all the information that I'm presenting today will be on the USDeN website, which I'll share later. The purpose of the pilot and grant planning awards in general are to support early stage research and deprescribing that will lead to larger scale projects. Also, the funding of these projects are primarily, but not exclusively, awarded to senior researchers, specifically in this call for applications around benzodiazepines. We would like to see projects that provide preliminary data, proof of concept, or developmental work that clearly leads to future larger scale studies. And just to be clear, we do have our regular request for applications that's posted on the website for our pilot and grant planning awards, and that webinar will be on October 21st. So just to remind everyone, this webinar is specifically for the benzodiazepine-focused pilots. So I'll talk a little bit now about the scope of the pilot awards that we're seeking to fund. And we want them to be focused on complementary and integrative health modalities to support deprescribing of benzodiazepines, as well as non-benzodiazepines and benzodiazepine receptor agonists, also known as the Z drugs, often used for sleep in older adults. This is a one-time funding opportunity as an administrative supplement award to USDeN from the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. So you might be thinking, well, what is deprescribing? And we like the definition of deprescribing from the University of South Australia. So, which is the deprescribing is the process of withdrawal, dose reduction, or substitution of an inappropriate, meaning high risk, unnecessary, or of low benefit medication supervised by a healthcare professional with the goal of managing polypharmacy and those for who polypharmacy is relevant and improving outcomes. And you can also see this definition on our website at the bottom of the screen. So in general, the pilots should have a clear and direct relationship to deprescribing, particularly around these benzodiazepine receptor agonist medications in older adults. And it needs to demonstrate a clear pathway for a future larger scale grant on the order of an NIH R01 or similar type of award. Next, I'll talk about the eligibility criteria for applicants. So applicants should hold a doctoral degree, which include an MD, PhD, PharmD, or an equivalent degree. They need to be employed by an institution as a faculty member, a research scientist, or an equivalent position by the beginning of the start date of the award. And they must be in a setting such as college or university, medical or nursing school, or other fiscally responsible organization. Lastly, each applicant can submit one application. However, 2 or more individuals from the same institution can apply. Applicants can be from non-US institutions, but you must articulate how the proposed research will apply outside of the home country, including the United States. We encourage applicants from underrepresented groups, including disadvantaged backgrounds and individuals with disabilities. So now I'll talk about the available funds for this mechanism. Each award will be up to $160,000 in total costs. That includes both direct and indirect costs. The indirect costs charged by the recipient institutions are via the federally negotiated rate, and foreign entities can charge no more than 8% of modified total direct costs. Each award is planning to begin around April or May of 2023, and the funds are to be used over a 1-year period. We are planning to fund 4 awards in this cycle. So now, what do you need to do to submit? And I'll talk about the materials. So first is a letter of intent. This letter of intent is required, and you can see at the bottom that we limit the letter of intent to 1 page with 1/2-inch margins and 11-point Arial font. I'd like to emphasize that these letters of intent must be submitted through the portal on the website of USDeN by 11:59 Pacific time on Monday, November 14th, 2022. And what we'd like for you to address in this letter of intent are the research team, the aims, some brief approach, how you are going to engage stakeholders, and the future grant planning activities that this pilot will lead to. So the other required sections of the application, we are asking that you have no more than 6 pages maximum, including a cover page that addresses the study aims, significance, how stakeholders will be engaged in your research, innovation, the approach, and then future directions, including how you plan to apply for a larger grant, and maybe touch on the aims and approaches that will be used in that grant. More details about these sections can be found at our website, and the complete applications are due at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on Friday, December 16th, 2022. I do want to call out specifically the requirement for stakeholder engagement, and we'd like for you to address the description of stakeholders, which can be fairly broad, details on how they're going to be engaged in your research, information on how they will inform the work that you're planning to do, a timeline of how they are being integrated into study-related activities, and the settings and methods of engagement. If you need more information, there's a link at the bottom of the screen to PCORI, which has great resources around stakeholder engagement. There are some additional things that you need to submit with your application. Namely, these do not contribute to the 6-page limit, as I spoke about before, but they include a 1/2-page project description that's in lay terminology for stakeholders to review, an NIH-style biosketch, and then several budgetary forms, including a summary, a justification, scope of work, the F&A rate agreement, and a subrecipient commitment form, if that's applicable. And again, as I said, you'll submit all of these things on the website. The link is up here at the top. And just to review again, I'll tell you the key dates that are important. So the letter of intent that is required is due Monday, November 14th. The full application is due Friday, December 16th. We will have our study section in early 2023, and awards will be announced in February of 2023, with the beginning of funding for the selected awards starting in April or May of 2023. So how will these proposals be scored? I'll tell you a little bit about the criteria. This will look very familiar to those of you who have submitted to the NIH or similar institutions. Each proposal will be reviewed by 2 experts, and they'll score your application on the overall impact, how likely this is going to lead to an R01 or equivalent, the innovation that it brings to the area of deprescribing, the scientific rigor of the approach, the feasibility that this can be completed in a 1-year time frame, the investigators and the environment. Again, very similar to the NIH review criteria. Additionally, how will this lead to larger scale work in future? So future grants, publications. How is it relevant to aging? And we define that generally as older adults, 65 and older. And then again, how stakeholders will be engaged in the research that you're going to lead. And then finally, the budget, although this aspect is not scored. So just a little bit about for the awardees, what the expectations and resources available are through USDeN. Namely, all awardees will submit a year-end report that is structured, and they will be asked to then present that work at the annual meeting of the US Deprescribing Research Network, which I'll talk about more in a minute. And we'll ask you also to complete a yearly online survey in the period after the award. That's just to track your progress on grant submissions and publications. Additionally, during the year of funding, you'll have quarterly calls with myself and Dr. Simmons in the pilot core, and as needed calls with the stakeholder engagement core. And we also invite you to participate in the USDeN webinars that happen on a regular basis. And there is a consultative service that you can access. Consults are usually for a very specific question that can be addressed by an expert in a 1-hour call. In addition to helping the awardees, these activities help foster the community within the network. As I mentioned, there is an annual meeting of the network. Our last one was in person for the first time on May 11th in Orlando, just before the American Geriatric Society annual meeting. We had over 100 people attend, and we had wonderful speakers from all across the network. These recordings are available on the US Deprescribing Research Network website, and we're looking forward to our next in-person meeting, our 4th meeting, on May 3rd, prior to AGS in Long Beach, California. I wanted to also mention that through USDeN, there are collaboration grants, just to make you aware. These are sort of small grants from $500 to $5,000 that try to focus on topic or site-specific collaborations. And some examples might be having a mini summit in a geographic area, or seed funding for geographically diverse investigators that want to collaborate. The application includes just a brief proposal and a budget justification, and these are reviewed on an ongoing basis, and so you are welcome to apply at any time. As I mentioned before, we are still going to have another webinar for our normal pilot and exploratory study and grant planning awards informational session. That's our normal RFA on October 21st, 2 p.m. Eastern. And if you would, please register on the USDeN website for that webinar. I just want to wrap up by saying, please visit the US Deprescribing Research Network website, which is deprescribingresearch.org. And in the upper right-hand corner, there is a join the network. You will not get spammed, but you will get great monthly newsletters as well as announcements about activities of the network. Thanks for your attention. And with that, we can open it up for questions. And I'm going to stop sharing. I also wanted to mention that in the chat, there is a link to examples of what constitutes complementary and integrative health methods and modalities that Dr. Murray provided to us.
Sandra, I think that we may need to post it again, and so that everyone can see it, because I think that went to host and panelists, but I will work on that while we see what questions are out there.
Does anybody have questions? You can either unmute or put them in the chat.
Sandra, I think there's some under the Q&A button.
The first question is, how do you define senior versus junior investigators? So for this request for applications, we have asked mostly for senior investigators. Those who have received independent funding previously is generally how we talk about senior investigators. Because criteria for promotion vary by institution, we don't specify that somebody has to be, an associate or full professor, but it's more about their experience and having submitted grants, large grants on the order of R01s before. And a junior investigator typically is somebody who has not received independent funding such as that. They may be in training grants or have career development awards, K awards at that stage, and they are typically have mentors still involved. For this award, we are really focusing on the PI being a senior investigator, but junior investigators can be part of the research team.
And Amanda,
Sandra, do you want to add anything?
Yeah.
Oh, or Mike, yep.
Yeah, I was just saying what maybe just another thing to keep in mind is people who are ready to become senior investigators and are ready to take that step. So, the reason sort of why there's this focus not on people at the very early stages of their career is that, as stated over and over in the RFA, the goal of this is that this pilot study will lead directly to a large grant application, something like an R01 or equivalent, say a large PCORI grant award or equivalent thing in, say, the VA system. And so if someone is just out of a postdoc or fellowship and is preparing to write a K award, but is not ready to take this pilot and put it into a large scale award like an R01 or equivalent, probably not the right fit. But for example, if you do have a K award or something equivalent and you're thinking you're heading towards that sort of K to R transition or equivalent, then this could be very much within your wheelhouse, if you are then able to take these results and use those to move rapidly towards a large grant submission.
And Mike, there's another related question in the chat. Are multi-PI teams with one senior and one junior person acceptable? And I would say yes to that. And a separate question, is the study aims section of the grant supposed to be formatted like the specific aims one-page section of NIH grants? And I would say that you can use that as a guide. It doesn't have to be formatted that way, as long as you include all of the required sections within the 6 allotted pages. It's up to your discretion how much space you allot for each of those sections.
There are 2 questions in the chat. Some are coming under Q&A and some are coming under chat. The first one that I see is for senior investigators. Do you expect they have submitted an R01 or a funded R01? And I think Mike actually addressed that a little bit, that if you'd be someone, if you or your team with a co-PI would be able to, really be making a case that you're going to be able to take this pilot and turn it into that large scale award, like the person who's at the end of a K, you would not need to already have an R01 to submit it. But the way Mike described it is as someone who, like, the next grant they probably are going to write is a K award, probably on your own, that would be what we would consider more junior. But so no requirement that you have already had an R01 to submit. There's another, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah, you probably were just going to read the same one that I was going to read. The other question in the chat is related to funding for 1 year. And the question is, would 18 months be allowed for a proposed budget? I'll let Cynthia, you or Mike take that.
So I'll give a crack at it. I do think we are targeting 1 year awards, as that's the way that our funding has come through, is that these are meant to be 12-month awards. But I'll see if Mike or our project officers, potentially they would want to weigh in also. Mike.
Yeah, I would love to get Marcel and Peter's perspective on this as well, because a part of it's really an administrative issue. So my understanding, and Marcel and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the administrative supplement mechanism, this basically the formal mechanism under which sort of, USDeN, receive the money thanks to NIH, and that we're able to distribute it out, is to support 1 year projects, because the funding that we as USDeN, the parent grant, gets is 1 year that we can then distribute out to people. Now we recognize that, a lot of projects might be hard to really do in 1 year. So historically, when we've done our other pilot grants, we have historically definitely been able to offer no cost extensions beyond that first year. But in terms of how the grant is officially written and presented, historically we have asked, and right now we continue to ask, for things to be budgeted and planned to occur within the 1 year, fully recognizing that sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. Marcel or Peter, do you have anything to add or clarification or correction to what I just said?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonably good summary of it for people. There's usually some opportunity to finish those pilot projects anyway. The parent network grant itself, has a end date that's scheduled at this time. It's subject to, you might be able to get a renewal, or you might get no cost extensions. And so this supplement that funds these pilots will go along with whatever the parent grant has.
Yeah.
So you should manage your pilots accordingly.
So we have another question in the Q&A from someone who'd emailed us to see if it qualifies as complimentary or alternative. And the person has taken a look at the website link we shared in the chat and still has questions and just wants to know how to get input about this specific question. I don't know if Peter, you'd feel comfortable, not to put you on the spot, but it would be great to have you clarify this if you're able, what the process would be.
Yeah, so I encourage folks to first look at the website. We have a catalog A to Z, from interventions to conditions, and what kind of interventions we see as important to complementary integrative health. And then, if you don't get a clear answer, then yes, please reach out to, the staff. I'm more than happy to become part of that conversation to clarify, whether something you're considering, we consider complementary and integrative health, because some things are going to be more obvious, like cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, or mindfulness meditation. But then some other things may fall within a more gray zone. And so I think it would be important to have a conversation, and I'm happy to be part of that.
And I'll just add that Constance, we actually were discussing with Peter right before this webinar started about the specific issue that you emailed, and we'll respond offline about that now that we've just spoken with Peter about it.
Any other questions? We have our experts here. And in the chat, there is the email address. If you do have other questions that you'd like to email us about, we're happy to reply by email as well.
Yeah, and just to add to what Amanda was saying, you know, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about format or whether you're eligible or your idea is eligible or any other thing. We want very much for people to, you know, have their questions answered. And also we want to encourage a lot of high quality applications. And so if you're thinking, well, I'm not sure, am I eligible? Is this thing, you know, is this idea eligible? Don't just sit on it. Please reach out to us, because if we can support you and we can make things eligible, we'd like to err on the side of really being inclusive, realizing there are some, of course, some boundaries that we do need to respect, but don't be shy. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to help you. And the other one thing I'll add to that is we have other resources. If you're thinking about like, okay, there's the stakeholder engagement component, like I haven't done that before. What does that mean? How do I incorporate that into my proposal? We have resources that we can point you to help with that. And we can even arrange a consultation, one-on-one consultation to support you're asking some questions that might be specific to your grant. So, please reach out, and also just check out our website because we have a bunch of useful resources there as well.
Yeah, there are a number of resources about stakeholder engagement, including recordings of a prior webinar that would be really helpful. But as Mike said, very happy to have questions also.
Right, and that is deprescribingresearch.org. Dr. Salih, Dr. Murray, anything else you would want to say to our guests?
Marcel?
I think it's a great, very exciting opportunity, and I encourage all of you to consider it. And, you know, I think we got a good response today. Hopefully we'll have other ways to get the word out. I hope you're archiving this webinar for people so they can, the people who might have missed it for whatever reason can see. So thanks.
I'll echo everybody's sentiment, very excited about this program. I know that maybe a lot of you have not explored complementary integrative interventions in the past. So again, please reach out to us, please reach out to me. Happy to have conversations, help clarify our definitions and so forth. But exciting to see this program move forward.
Thank you. We're very excited about it also. And thank you to our pilot team for hosting us today.
Well, if there are no further questions, thanks for attending the webinar. And as mentioned in the chat, the recording will be on the website for anyone who didn't make it, or if you want to replay it and hear some more details. And then also the RFA and other details are on the website as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.